about 26 Second Avenue? Any sort of story, like a specific story you wanted to share about the Swami and your interaction at that time?
Not really.
Okay, I just wanted to check before I move on, because I've got San Francisco next, which is another big part of the story. And I wanted to ask you, how did this instruction to go to start a temple in San Francisco come about?
It was kind of an afterthought. I told the Swami that I was going to India, and that I would be going from California. And as I was leaving, he mentioned that you should just try to start a center in California, and that's what he said, and it just kind of like grew on me. I didn't have those kinds of plans, but it grew on me to the point where I cashed in my tickets to go to India, and decided to stay in the San Francisco area and start a temple.
Could you describe San Francisco at that time and Haight-Ashbury and this sort of burgeoning movement? We've got like the Human Being, Hippie Hill, the Summer of Love, which I know you've mentioned was actually like the summer of drugs. Really, it was quite damaging to a lot of people. Could you briefly sort of discuss that?
Well, the Summer of Love was called the Summer of Drugs by one of the musicians of that period, looking back. And it was, even though it's very romantic to think of the Summer of Love, there were a lot of truants and a lot of drugs and a lot of crime that existed at that time. At the same time, there was a lot of people who were seeking higher consciousness, and I was aware of that. And there was an organization called the Merry Pranksters that was headed by Ken Kesey, and a friend of mine was part of that group. Ken Kesey took a bus full of people from California to New York, about a 3,000-mile journey, about a 1,600 kilometer or 4,600 kilometer journey. And that was the beginning of the hippie movement. He was a sort of a hippie who was over 30 years old, and at that time that was considered to be a little over the top, a little, excessive. But I realized that there were a lot of people who were genuinely seeking something higher. And eventually those people gravitated away from San Francisco, and they migrated into Marin County, north of San Francisco, and formed communes, because the Haight-Ashbury scene was very degraded. It became more and more degraded as time went on.
So Haight-Ashbury is an area in San Francisco?
It's an area where it was known as the hippie area during the hippie era, and only lasted about 2 years, or 1 year.
And so when you went from New York, you headed to the Haight-Ashbury?
A friend of mine was part of the Merry Pranksters, and he was the one who informed me about the Haight-Ashbury, and there was a movement at that time to create a higher consciousness.
So that seemed like a good place to go then, to maybe attract.
It seemed to me to be a good place to go. It wasn't just starting a temple in a city that was not right for this sort of thing, but it was in a neighborhood in which people were seeking something.
So that actually leads me to the question: who is your friend Sam and your friend Melanie? If you could describe.
Sam and Melanie were friends of mine, who Sam was in the same university that I attended, and as I was going out to California, I met them, and they had read Autobiography of a Yogi, or Sam had read it, and they were very interested in spiritual life, and they eventually became devotees and still are.
So you met them and they came to San Francisco to help you?
They actually helped me.
So could you speak on what the Avalon Ballroom was, and how did this mantra dance, rock dance, come about?
What happened with the Avalon Ballroom event was this. There was a guy in the Haight-Ashbury, he lived right on Haight Street, I think, who kind of convinced us that we should do something really, really momentous. And I met him when I was kind of walking down the street in Haight-Ashbury, and he said, "Are you with Bhaktivedanta?" And eventually it led to us going to his home, having a kirtan, and him saying that giving us the idea of having a mantra rock dance, that we would need celebrities like Allen Ginsberg, who eventually came and was a part of it. And then we had bands like the Grateful Dead and Moby Grape, who were very popular at that time.
So what was the Avalon Ballroom?
The Avalon Ballroom was a ballroom that was peopled by, mostly, the audiences were hippie types. And it was on Fridays and Saturday nights, a kind of mecca for hippiedom and the music that they liked, like with the Grateful Dead and other groups of that nature, rock music.
And it was to do with raising money for a temple, is that?
We raised money for the temple at that time, and Chet Helms was the guy who ran the ballroom, and we used to make fun of him because he was like, he had long hair and he